All right, good afternoon, everybody. So I am the Chief Technology Officer of Wikistrat. Wikistrat is actually the world's first massively multiplayer online consultancy. But what does that actually mean? Well, we have a global network of subject matter experts who we can bring together on our wiki-based platform to conduct war games, strategic studies and forecasting exercises for a range of government and corporate clients. Essentially what we do is crowdsource consulting, where these best and brightest can compete their ideas against each other to generate answers for clients who can watch the whole process live. And this produces insights that often can't be found anywhere else. So what I'm going to go through just for a couple of minutes now is a little bit more about Wikistrat and the context of the industry we're in. And then I'm going to spend about 7 minutes giving you some ideas and some of the methodology that we use for rapidly assembling teams of people who've often never worked together, never met, and never used our platform, and guiding them through an engagement. So in the world of consulting, you often have this very slow-moving cycle. You have a small team consisting of a handful of people who will work on a single question, often for months. There's 1 or 2 junior researchers who are responsible for doing the bulk of the work. They're managed by a mid-level consultant, and a senior consultant handles the client-facing side of the engagement. So from the client's point of view, you often have a little bit of a black box, and from the analyst's point of view, you often have some elements of groupthink. And so from this process, you often have a shredder as the filing cabinet of the work. I remember speaking to a junior analyst, and I asked them what was the mark of a successful engagement. And their comment was that if on the day they actually hand in some work, it's not shredded, they've probably done pretty well when it comes to relevancy and context. Imagine you're a client who commissions a study on Egypt because you're wanting to do some work there. And this is written in a time of relative peace and calm. The work is done, completed, printed, bound, and the slides are ready for delivery. Except on the day you walk into the office, the entire political and social context changes overnight, and all the work that you've completed so far has now come to nothing. The project will have to be started again. In addition, bringing experts into this process often creates logistics hell. Synchronizing the schedules of a handful of experts not only entails a lot of patience and a delay in your calendar, but by the time you factor in the cost of flights, hotels, meals, and sometimes even photocopying, it becomes a really complicated process. So the problem is this: how do you take an industry that is 200 years old and help them innovate? How do you disrupt something like this? Well, we knew that at Wikistrat we'd need to be fast, we'd need to be transparent, we'd need to be interactive, and we'd need to be diverse in our opinion, but the whole time we would also need to be cheaper than all of the incumbents. So to do this, we use Confluence from day one of our operations. We don't really see Confluence as a wiki. We see it as a data store with a hierarchy, a security model, a plugin SDK, and a remote API, and this all comes together to give you a platform from which we can build our service on top of. When combined with Atlassian's crowd for single sign-on, we have a complete ecosystem from which we can deliver our tools to both clients and analysts alike. In fact, 100% of our client and analyst interaction takes place via the wiki. With the exception of the odd phone call and email, every time one of our clients or one of our contributors interacts with us, they do so online on our Confluence-based platform. We've built the entire experience to be all-encompassing, and we've also tried to make it fun and social. The end result is that people often find working with us to be quite addictive, and I'll come to some of those reasons in a minute. Now, obviously, the two concepts here are not mutually exclusive, but it's more important that people want and enjoy using your platform than simply feeling the need that they have to be in there. So the question remains, given 48 hours notice, how can you take 50 contributors and ask them to build 200 or more pages in the space of a very short period of time? Or how do you assemble an ad hoc team? So everything that follows now is going to come from a really simple philosophy, and that's that people find it much easier to think in terms of stories and narratives. So the work that you guide people through should be structured in much the same way to make it really easy for them to process. So the way we put our stories together at Wikistrat is in the form of a mission through which the analysts will be led. And as we take them through the mission, we structure everything in much the same way. So the mission starts with a briefing. At Wikistrat, we're big fans of providing briefings in a video format. This is just as familiar to ex-government and ex-military personnel as generations of people that have grown up playing video games. They're given an introduction to the task, to the engagement, and their context. They're also given instructions for the work that they'll need to complete in the coming weeks. They're given a schedule, deliverables, and members of the team are appointed as responsible for ensuring the component work gets done, along with the contact details of everyone in the ecosystem. So now we've given them the mission, we need to motivate them and help them through the process. And the first part of motivating them is to recognize and reward them for the work they do. So we tend to follow the game mechanics or gamification principles of a guy called Gabe Zickerman. And the three key principles that he suggests you build all reward systems on are reward early, reward often, and try not to go negative. Find a reason really early on to recognize and reward your contributors. Find repeated reasons to reward them, and try to always do so in a positive way. Don't admonish them for actions that you don't want them to take. In addition, you need to find things to motivate them towards. So one of the things which we're quite unique about at Wikistrat is the way in which we pay our analysts. We have revenue splits, commissions, prize pools, and other incentives for them being a part of our network. But people are motivated towards this principle, SAPS, status, access, power, and stuff. And it's actually in that order. See, the problem with stuff is that people can put a monetary value on something. If you ask someone to work towards a $20 bottle of wine or even a $100 bottle of wine, they can actually break that task down into dollars. But if you motivate people towards getting access to a space in the wiki that has material that will be just for them, or if you motivate them towards having special markers against their name and profile, that becomes a fundamentally different experience. But that has to be genuine. It can't be arbitrary because people will always sense arbitrary rewards. So at Wikistrat, we provide people with constant reminders of status, access, and power. From reminders on the dashboard to how they're doing inside the ecosystem, to showing their rank based on both external credentials and participation on the hover card of their profile, and repeated reminders of rank. We also provide leaderboards and participation guides throughout the wiki so that people can see how they're going, and they know that clients can see how they're going as well. So with the team motivated, the next step is to support and structure the way they work. You need to understand that many of your users won't necessarily be familiar with all the features of Confluence. They won't even necessarily be familiar with all the rules and guidelines you want them to follow. And that's okay. So the slides that follow come from a competition we ran last year. We invited a range of academic institutions to compete for a prize by submitting strategies on our wiki platform. The competition was won actually by a local university, Claremont Graduate University, who nudged out Oxford University with a few points in the last week of the competition. So there's some really easy visual victories you can take here. For example, you can see we've used the lozenge macro and a traffic light system to indicate where we want people to be working now, where we want them to be ready to work, and the areas in which they don't need to go yet. We've created visual guides and logos that jump them into other pages and other spaces in the wiki so they've got an easy and consistent visual reference for the different parts of their work. We can also use the metadata macro, and with a little bit of jQuery, we can summarize hundreds of pages in a single view for the analysts and have them very quickly click on a flag to filter that list and then click down into the material so that they don't find themselves hunting throughout the system for important information. And finally, we're able to use things like the create page macro and templates to take these users and have them create pages that have the labels already set, the metadata already set. They appear in the right part of the hierarchy without them having to know what they did to get there. That knowledge and that learning can come later in their experience. So finally, I think something that many people neglect when constructing a wiki space is the idea that stories must end. So it's okay that a wiki space is a living deliverable, that you can start it again at any time, that people can keep working on it. But at some point you need to set a deadline. You need to set the first time in which everything should be done and ready for release. I mean, think of it the same way you do your software development. Just set a point where you're going to ship what you have and have people work towards it. And so at Wikistrat that works by having a support team come through, check for spelling, formatting and consistency, and actually delivering to the client both a traditional report about the engagement and a video summarizing everything that took place over the engagement, even though the whole space is there and ready to go. So with my last minute, I just want to share one more way in which we build this ecosystem. And that is we take Crowd for single sign-on, and we actually use it to integrate other tools that come out of the box in other languages and still deliver it to the client inside the same system. So I know a lot of people have talked about having a chat system inside their wiki. What you can see on the screen here is a Facebook-looking chat function that comes out of the box with PHP, and with Crowd we've managed to successfully keep the security permissions running whilst delivering it via JavaScript to the user's experience. Although a word of warning, for those of you who plan on integrating new things, especially if you try and keep a secure wiki, make sure you understand some of the risks involved with adding additional tools. Not only that, but with the licensing model of 10 users, we're actually able to create deal rooms, semantically separated wikis and other areas in which we can actually shuffle our users back and forth without them even being aware that they've moved to a physically separate server. And there are plugins out there such as Ad-Hoc workflows, which will automatically publish pages back to the master wiki if you indicate that they are suitable to be brought back. So that's how we've constructed our entire ecosystem. But what I really want you to take away from this talk is that when creating a new wiki space, when structuring new content, it's okay to think of it as an engagement and as a story, with a beginning, a middle, and end. And if you take that view of all your wiki spaces being a narrative, and if you take that view of all your wiki spaces being a journey through which the users will go, you'll find it's just much easier for people to think about what you want them to do, to guide them through that process, and then to actually have what you might call a shippable or deliverable result, even if you're forever tinkering with the material inside.